Hi, friends. This is Benjamin from English Classes Online. In today's lesson, we want to look at Journey of the Magi by T.S.Eliot. We want to analyze the poem, and this is being done in response to a request by one of our esteemed viewers. If you are new to this channel, kindly subscribe to the channel by clicking on the subscribe button below. Click on the bell icon as well so that whenever a new video goes live on the channel, you will be notified instantly. Without much ado, let's dive into the lesson right away. And let's see how okay. 8 days ago, I Gifty, I hope I got the pronunciation correctly, made this comment. Thank you very much, sir. Please, can you please teach about the journey of the Magi? So in response to this request from Gifty, this video is being uploaded. So Gifty, if you are watching right now, this video is in response to the request you made 8 days ago. And for those of you out there who have been, passionately supporting this channel, you are free to request for a topic that you would like us to teach. And we are always happy to respond to requests like that. If you have any questions, any comments, you can as well leave them in the comment section below. So let's dive into the lesson. Let's begin with an agenda. We have 6 items on our agenda. We are going to look at the poem's background. We are going to read the poem, have an overview and structure of the poem, a brief summary, analyzing the title, reading and analyzing the stanzas. So let's begin with the first, which is the poet's background. T.S.Eliot was a poet, dramatist, and literary critic. Born in 1888, he grew up in America and studied at Harvard, the Sorbonne, and Oxford. Settling in England in 1914, Eliot at first worked in teaching and banking. Thereafter, he worked in a publishing company known as Faber and Faber, where he became a significant figure. Okay. Now, in 1917, he published his first collection of poems known as Proof-Rock and Other Observations. Then in 1922, he wrote The Waste Land, which became one of the most influential and important poems of the 20th century. He wrote Journey of the Magi in 1927. That's the poem we're analyzing. Then T.S.Eliot died in 1965. So that's about the poet's background. Let's look at the setting. By the way, setting refers to the place and time within which the actions of a literary work are situated. And you know, this is a narrative poem, so we want to look at the setting as well. The poem is set in the valley that contains Bethlehem and Jerusalem. Of course, you know that the poem itself is a biblical allusion to the three wise men from the east who arrived Jerusalem in search of he that is born King of the Jews. If you refer to the scripture, precisely the book of Matthew, chapter 2, verses 1 and 2, you will begin to read something about the three wise men. It's a biblical story, and this poem is based on that biblical story. Bethlehem of Judea was the place where the King Jesus was born, and that was where the three wise men eventually went and saw the child Jesus. So if you read Matthew chapter 2 from verse 3 to 12, you will get the entire story about the journey of the three wise men. And like I said, the journey of the three Magi is based on this biblical story. Now let's read the entire poem, all right? You see, a poem is written to be read aloud, and that's what we are going to do. The first thing you do before you analyze a poem is to read it. This is very important, okay? So let's begin. A cold coming we had of it, just the worst time of the year for a journey, and such a long journey. The ways deep and the weather sharp, the very dead of winter, and the camels galled, soft-footed, refractory, lying down in the melting snow. There were times we regretted the summer palaces on slopes, the terraces, and the silken girls bringing sherbet. Then the camel men cursing and grumbling and running away and wanting their liquor and women, and the night fires going out and the lack of shelters, and the cities hostile and the towns unfriendly, and the villages dirty and charging high prices, and a hard time we had of it. At the end, we prefer to travel all night, sleeping in snatches, with the voices singing in our ears, saying that this was all folly. Then stanza 2, then at dawn we came down to a temperate valley, wet below the snow line, smelling of vegetation, with a running stream and a watermill beating the darkness, and 3 trees on the low sky, and an old white horse galloped away in the meadow. Then we came to a tavern with vine leaves over the lintel, 6 hands at an open door, dicing for pieces of silver, and feet kicking the empty wine skins. But there was no information, and so we continued, and arriving at evening, not a moment too soon, finding the place, it was, you may say, satisfactory. The last verse, the last stanza, please. All this was a long time ago, I remember, and I would do it again, but set down, this, where we led all that way for birth or death. There was a birth, certainly. We had evidence and no doubt. I had seen birth and death, but had thought they were different. This birth was hard and bitter agony for us, like death, our death. We return to our places, these kingdoms, but no longer at ease here in the old dispensation. With an alien people clutching their gods, I should be glad of another death. So at this juncture, I would switch to the full screen so you can see a clearer, you can have a clearer view of the details that we shall be sharing in the analysis. So let's now move on to the overview and structure of the poem. I want you to begin to take notes. The Journey of the Magi is a metaphorical poem based upon a biblical story about the three wise men, as I earlier hinted. The poem describes the journey they took when they followed the star to Bethlehem, where the Christ child was born. It has the following structure. First of all, it is a 3-stanza poem made up of 43 lines. Stanza 1 contains 20 lines, stanza 2 has 11 lines, and stanza 3 has 12 lines. Altogether, you have 43 lines, okay? Then a brief summary. The poem depicts the difficult situations that the Magi passed through in their journey to meet the Christ child after his birth. The narrator, of course, I should say the speaker, begins with a list of all the hardships which he and his men experienced on their way to Bethlehem, where Christ was born. These included the harsh weather, scarcity of food, and lack of shelter. They met rejection when they arrived in the town. Okay? In stanza 2, the men got to their destination and found it to be simply satisfactory. Okay? After they returned home, they experienced change. They were no longer the same people they were before they embarked on the journey. The narrator desires a second birth that will reconnect him with God. Now, analyzing the title, let's look at the title of the poem. The title of the poem, Journey of the Magi, gives us a picture of the harsh conditions which the Magi, that is, the three wise men, passed through on their way to see the newly born King Christ in Bethlehem, Judea. The title is significant in that the poem describes a journey which is an important human experience. In the literal sense, the journey of the Magi, the three wise men, takes them through some difficult situations, but bring them to a satisfactory destination. What makes the title of the poem even more significant is the fact that the poem describes a figurative journey, a journey from paganism to Christianity, a transformation of life from darkness to light, which is what the birth of Christ has brought to the whole world, especially those who believe. Okay? So that is the significance of the title, Journey of the Magi. That brings us to reading and analyzing the poem stanza by stanza. Now let's look at, you can go through the stanza 1, okay? I just try to give a few lines of it here, an abridged version of it, but you can refer to the entire stanza, the whole of stanza 1, read it through again, and then you'll be able to understand our analysis. Here in stanza 1, the speaker uses the first-person narrative point of view, and this shows that he is one of the travelers. Of course, the speaker is one of the Magi, okay? Because he uses the first person pronoun. Look at that that line. A cold coming we had of it. We means he was among them, okay? Now, the expressions, just the worst time of the year and such a long journey, indicate how difficult and inconveniencing the journey was for them, okay? Obviously, it wasn't an easy journey. It was a difficult one. They had terrible experiences. The whole of this stanza gives an overview of the journey and all the things they passed through. In lines 4 to 8, the speaker gives a more detailed description of the harsh weather and how it affected both the travelers and their camels. Now, take note of the following lines: the waves deep and the weather sharp, the very dead of winter. So now you analyze the poem by looking at the poet's choice of words, because the words used in a poem are the building blocks to convey the message of the poem. Okay, so that's exactly what it is. You can't analyze a poem without looking at the words used specifically. And the camels go soft-footed, refractory. So you see, the camels they also had rough experiences as well. Lying down in the melting snow. Look at it. Imagine lying down in the melting snow. Imagine the cold. There were times we regretted. So that paints a picture of how rough it was. The picture of the degree of suffering they experienced is painted with the words, there were times we regretted. Okay? So let's move on. Okay? Still on stanza 1, we want to look at lines 9 to 13. Okay? And those lines are as follows: the summer palaces on slopes, the terraces, and the silken girls bringing sherbet, then the camel men cursing and grumbling and running away and wanting their liquor and women, and the night fires going out and the lack of shelters. Take note of the repetition here, okay? In subsequent lessons, we shall be looking at the poetic devices, but today I just want to give you an overview of what the poem is about. We want to just look at it. You need to first know what the poem is about, and when you are familiar with what it is, then you can from there go into other types of analysis, such as the thematic analysis, analysis of the poetic devices, and so on and so forth. Now, in the above lines, we find more of the tough times they passed through. They had to sacrifice the pleasures of the summer palaces on slopes and terraces, and the silken girls bringing sherbet. They had to suffer abandonment from the camel men who were cursing and grumbling, running away and wanting their liquor and women. Okay? In addition to that, they suffered in the cold weather, all right, with the night fires going out and the lack of shelters. So these were part of their experiences, okay? And don't forget that the poem, while describing a journey as if it were really a physical journey, is also metaphorically describing the journey of human life, okay? The journey of human life. Okay, so let's look at lines 14 to 20, and they are as follows: and the city is hostile, and the towns unfriendly, and the villages dirty and charging high prices. Take note of the repetition, and. Okay, all these were, you know, just to give you a picture of all the unpleasant experiences they passed through. So, and is for addition, one rough experience on top of another. Okay? A hard time we had of it. At the end, we prefer to travel all night, sleeping in snatches, with the voices singing in our ears, saying that this was all folly. You see, they had also discouraging voices, demoralizing them, okay? Now, apart from the harsh weather and the setbacks they suffered, they also suffered from hostile cities, unfriendly towns, dirty villages, and high prices. All these added to the unpleasant experiences that could be described as a hard time, which compelled them to prefer to travel all night, possibly to avoid the hostile treatment they received from the people on the way. Okay? They also had to contend with discouraging voices which kept blaming them for embarking on a foolish journey. Okay? Now we come to stanza 2. We are through with stanza 1. At dawn, we came down to a temperate valley, wet below the snow line, smelling of vegetation, with a running stream and a watermill beating the darkness. Okay, so you can go through the entire stanza once again. Okay, so you will understand the analysis. So here in stanza 2, the speaker reports a positive change in the situation of things. Here he talks about a new dawn when they arrived in temperate valley. Having passed through a long distance in terrible conditions, they are now in a new valley below the snow line, a valley that smells of vegetation. Here they find a running stream and a watermill. The picture painted here is that of a better place, a clear departure from the lack and the privations they have experienced so far before arriving there. Okay? So that is exactly what the poem is about, okay? Giving you an insight into what transpired in the journey of the Magi. Still on stanza 2, let's look at lines 24 to 29, and they are as follows. And 3 trees on the low sky, and an old white horse galloped away in the meadow. Then we came to a tavern with vine leaves over the lintel, 6 hands at an open door dicing for pieces of silver, and feet kicking the empty wineskins. But there was no information, and so we continued and arriving, okay, well, when we get to the next lines, we discover how they eventually arrive. Now, in lines 24 to 29, the speaker continues his description of the new place they have arrived. It appears they expected to get information about Christ at a tavern with vine leaves over the lintel, but they received no information there, so they continued the journey. Okay? Now, lines 30 to 32, and arriving at evening, not a moment too soon, finding the place, it was, you may say, satisfactory. So you see, here they finally arrived their destination at evening. The speaker's description of their arrival lacks the tone of jubilation. However, he admits that their arrival was, you may say, satisfactory. This seems obvious from the biblical point of view. They achieved their mission of meeting the new child that was born, King of the Jews. Ironically, however, they do not find him in a king's palace. They find him in a manger. All right, that's ironical. You know, they might have expected to get into a royal family, a palace of a king where this prince was born. But on the contrary, they find him in a manger, okay, where you have food meant for farm animals, okay? Now, now that brings us to stanza 3, of course. We are through with stanza 2, so now we come to stanza 3, okay? Now, all this was a long time ago, I remember. You can go through the entire stanza 3, and I will do it again, but set down, so you can read the entire stanza, then you'll be able to appreciate the analysis. In stanza 3, the speaker shifts attention to expressing his feelings about their experience in the whole journey. To start with, he indicates that he is sharing a memory of something that took place long ago. All this was a long time ago, I remember. Then he declares his willingness to do it again. This underscores his belief that the journey has been a worthwhile mission in spite of all the terrible conditions they had experienced, okay? As the saying goes, the end justifies the means. Even though they passed through a lot of hardship, they are arriving there and getting to see the child that was born king of the Jews. Of course, they achieved their mission, okay? So let's continue on stanza 3, and let's look at lines 35 to 39. This, where we led all that way for birth or death. There was a birth, certainly. We had evidence and no doubt. I had seen birth and death, but had thought they were different. This birth was hard and bitter agony for us, like death, our death. Okay, so you can see here the speaker poses a direct question to the audience, you know, those listening to him narrate this story. Were we led all that way for birth or death? He's asking here, all this journey, was it for the purpose of birth or death? And then he now uses a rhetorical question, which is meant to emphasize the fact that the journey itself has some deep spiritual undertone, okay? The speaker gives an emphatic answer to his own question. There was a birth, certainly. He asked that we had evidence and no doubt. Ironically, he claimed that, you know, the birth is like death, and he described the birth they had witnessed as one that was hard and bitter agony. He concludes that this birth was like death, our death. Now, to understand the poet's choice of words here, one has to understand the biblical allusion to the mission of the Christ child. You know, Christ was born to save humanity from sins, and in order to achieve this mission, he was going to die on the cross of Calvary. So even though they had gone to see him, you know, at his birth, the truth is that the purpose of his birth was for him to die on the cross. So you can see the tinge of irony in the whole thing, okay? So the whole thing sounds a bit paradoxical, you know, life, death being put side by side, okay? Now let's look at some other lines in stanza 3, and we want to look at lines 40 to 43. Of course, the last lines. We return to our places, these kingdoms, but no longer at ease here in the old dispensation, with an alien people clutching their gods, I should be glad of another death. Okay? Now, in this line, the speaker described the travelers' return to their places after the trip. He, however, reveals that something has changed in their feelings or way of life after that experience. He insists that they were no longer at ease here in the old dispensation. The poet seems to allude to the new life that occurs after one is converted from his or her old sinful nature to a new life in Christ. In such an experience, the new life does not feel comfortable with the old way of life, which is characterized by pagan beliefs. Take note of one of the lines of the poem, which says, "With an alien people clutching their gods." So he makes a reference to the old way of life, where one might have worshipped idols, and now he has been introduced to the real God, and he is expected to do away with the man-made gods, okay, the small gods. So there is a kind of change here, and it comes with a kind of inner conflict. Should I continue with the old way of life, or should I now move ahead with the new way of life that I have just experienced? Now, having come in contact with the true God, whom the Christ child represents, don't forget, Christ is also called Emmanuel in the Bible, which means God with us, okay? So having gone to see Christ, who is Emmanuel, God with us, the travelers are no longer at home with serving other gods. The speaker concludes by declaring his willingness to die another death. Well, this may refer to the death of the old man, the old way of life, which paves the way for a new life in Christ. On the other hand, it could also refer to the death of the physical body, which paves the way for the soul of man to rest in peace in the bosom of his God. So you can always see that there is this close relationship between life and death, okay? Because when one dies physically, there's also the opening of a new door to a new life, okay? And when one is converted from pagan life to Christian life, he is assumed to have died in his old life, and then he is born again in the new life. Okay, so that is what this whole poem is alluding to. Okay. Okay, so that is exactly what it is. Let's now move on and begin to see more of the things, especially by way of conclusion. Okay, want to reach some conclusions and summarize, sum up the things we have seen so far in the poem. Now, journey of the Magi is an allusion to the journey of the three wise men, the journey they took when they followed the star to Bethlehem, where the Christ child was born. Okay. In this metaphorical poem, T.S.Eliot uses the biblical story of the three wise men's journey to Bethlehem at the birth of Christ to portray his personal spiritual journey to conversion to a new life as a Christian. Okay. This poem depicts the inner conflicts and physical challenges that one has to pass through in order to attain spiritual transformation. Okay, like the journey of the Magi that was difficult and painful before their eventual arrival at their destination, genuine transformation in one's life usually happens after one has passed through a similar painful process. So this brings us to the end of today's lesson. We have been looking at Journey of the Magi by T.S.Eliot. I hope you enjoyed the lesson. If you did, make sure you like the video and share the video with your friends and relations. And if you have not yet subscribed to the channel, this is, of course, the appropriate time for you to hit the subscribe button. And make sure you click on the bell icon as well, so that whenever a new video goes live on the channel, you will be notified instantly. Okay? If you have any questions or suggestions or comments, leave them in the comments section below. Now, you might be interested in some free resources that we have in the description section. One of them is, a free PDF ebook titled The Basic Units of English Grammar. If you are interested in it, just click on the link and download a free copy of it. You will find other ebooks, one of which is Good Success in English, a complete study package for effective English learning. If you are interested in it or in any of the other ones, just click on the one you like and download a copy for yourself. There are other ebooks that will teach you skill development, because here on this channel, we do not only teach the English language, we also use the English language as a powerful tool for creating content. And so we teach you content creation, because if you can use language, then you can use language as a tool to create content. And if you can create valuable content, then you have the right to monetize the content and create for yourself multiple streams of income, just like what we are doing on this channel, okay? So if you are interested in learning how to set up an online teaching business, we have put together a complete training program. So if you are interested in it, you can comment in the comment section below. Just say, I'm interested in that training program. And if you are preparing to go and study abroad, and you are likely going to take the IELTS test, IELTS, then we also have a complete training program that will help you to prepare adequately for that test. We have a program also for the IELTS alternative, which is Duolingo English test. So you can indicate your interest if you are going for Duolingo English test. But if you are going for IELTS, you will find a direct link in the description box. So I want to say a big thank you to all of you for being part of today's episode. I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson. Goodbye for now and remain blessed.